Combat is in, but is it here to stay? Welcome back to another Traveling Goof video. So the first LRG Regional is over. I talked about my experience last video, but today we're going to talk about the top 8, the best players, the champions of the first tournament. So first, I want to thank Robert Wilson for compiling all the info on these top 8 decks. I put a link to his awesome article in the comments. But before we continue on and talk shop, I want to express my sincere sadness on hearing the news of Philip Miller's tragic passing. I only met him the one time in Seattle, but he and Doug made a constant effort to welcome me on their Overpower Adventure podcast when I tuned in. In person, I learned that Phil's kindness, sincerity, and excitement were even greater. He was happy to meet new players and provided encouragement and a friendly face, not only to myself, but to everyone that I saw him interacting with. I wish I had the opportunity to get to know him better, and my thoughts and prayers go out to his family. Phil came into Seattle as a pillar of the community, and as a person whose reputation for kindness and sportsmanship preceded him. He came out as the champion of the first modern Overpower tournament, and as a person that everyone is going to remember for the man he was, not just the skilled way that he played. But there are those who can far better express these sentiments than I, so I will leave any further words to those who knew him better. Rest in peace, Phil. So as I said, the Seattle Regional is over, and we have a new Overpower meta. I'm going to primarily talk about the decks that made it into the top 8, but I will touch on some of the other things that I saw around the tournament as well. And if you stick around, I'll be finishing with some meta predictions for the up-and-coming Heroes and Games Regional number 2 in Columbus, Ohio. So combat is in, and it wasn't even close. All 3 of the big 8-stat characters were in the top 8. Zoro and Leonidas led the way with 3 decks apiece, but I also encountered 2 Zoros myself, as well as a Sun Wukong, and I played Leonidas. So as I talk about this, let me put up a list of all the characters making it into the top 8 so you can see for yourself. The character that really was everywhere was Billy the Kid. This support Combat 7 was in half of the top 8 decks and in 2 of the 8 matches that I faced. He beat out Watson, Jane, or any of the other characters I talked about as reserve staples. And because he was only in reserve for most of these decks, we didn't see too many of his specials come out, except for these 2 that can be played from reserve. But with all the Leonidases, Zoros, Sun Wukongs, and Billy the Kids, combat really couldn't be touched in this first LRG meta. And so before we go on, let me show you what the top 8 decks looked like. Number 8 had Zeus, Wicked Witch, Billy the Kid, and Korak. Number 7 had Mummy, Sun Wukong, Robin Hood, and Billy the Kid. Number 6 had Zoro, Dr. Watson, Sherlock Holmes, and Leonidas. Number 5 had Mina Harker, Joan of Arc, Robin Hood, and Cthulhu. The number 4 deck had Zoro, Leonidas, Jane Porter, Dr. Watson. Bronze medal deck, Wicked Witch, Mina Harker, Sun Wukong, Billy the Kid. Coming in second was another Wicked Witch, Jane Porter, Joan of Arc, a tournament favorite, and Morgan Le Fay. And finally, champion Phil Miller's deck had Zoro, Leonidas, Deja Thoris, and Billy the Kid. So, combat domineered, but energy was also prevalent in the top 8. We had 1 Zeus and 3 Wicked Witches show up, surpassing the single Cthulhu and Sherlock Holmes representatives from brute force and intellect. The other 8s didn't make the cut. We didn't see a single Professor Moriarty. We didn't see Hercules. Most surprising to me, there wasn't a single Hercules deck in the top 8. I did come across a couple in the matches that I faced, but the Columbus Regional will have to find a new way to get this half-man, half-god into the mix. So home bases were more split. While 3 decks had the round table, most of the rest had representation too. So that was pretty cool that we saw 5 of the 8 total home bases in the top 8. Only Spartan Training Grounds, Barsoom, and Event Horizon didn't make a high play showing. So Barsoom makes sense because there are only 4 characters so far that have those stat boosts, and only Deja showed up of those in the top 8 list. I'm surprised we didn't see more Spartan Training Grounds and Leonidas combos. However, it looks like most players tried to play Zoro instead of the Training Ground. This kind of makes sense because it seems like seasoned players don't like the basic and training universe cards so much. So I'm going to do what I can to change people's minds on that. And as a final mention, Event Horizon didn't show up either. This was a no-brainer to me because it seems by far to be the weakest home base out there. Only 2 decks ran events out of the top 8, and none of them had more than 1. All the other locations can give a chance at helping out, whether that's extra attacks from Asclepion, or having some extra cards in reserve, or even stashing those awesome any characters so that you can avoid those Grim Reapers coming. But Event Horizon gives you a single chance in 1 round to draw 1 extra card. It just seems really weak at this point. Alright, and let's talk about the importance of negating. Only Mina Harker, Mummy, Morgan Le Fay, and Sherlock Holmes even showed up. Van Helsing didn't hit the top 8, nor did Merlin or Dracula. Now, I'm not too surprised because Merlin's got a really high cost, so I didn't think that he was going to show up. And then Dracula, his main differentiator is the fact that he can stop teamwork and teammate cards. As we'll see, those teammate cards didn't really play too much of a role here, so he just did not show up in any deck that I saw. Instead, we had these characters that had the half negates as well as really good supporting abilities with Morgan Le Fay and Sherlock Holmes. Alright, so what were the big game changers in the tournament? It was pressure, pressure, pressure. You had some big Leonidas 8s backed up by all of Zoro's numerical specials carrying the day. You also had a lot of use for the Wicked Witch and her Harness the Wind to shift attacks. Now, Sun Wukong blended the two with his own transformation trickery as well as his big 11s and 6s. And then, of course, you had Billy the Kid, who was throwing in some attacks from reserve. That all adds up to a whole lot of pressure. But what I really liked was that there are a lot of cool deck ideas out there. It wasn't a boring run of Cadillacs clogging the highway. Now, Leonidas, Zoro, they did make a lot of decks, but we also had some Zeus decks. We had a Cthulhu deck. We had Joan of Arc decks. We also saw Robin Hood keep up the pressure a lot on these non-Zoro and Leonidas teams. So as I mentioned, the decks were all offense. The Wicked Witch and Sun Wukong, as well as the single Korak, led the way in terms of defense, and that was more just for shifting attacks as opposed to direct avoids. Now, I'm surprised we didn't see more of the Giant Man from Mars event, as this could be set into any deck and acts like a mini Sun Wukong, Korak, or Wicked Witch shift. Now, one final review on Universe cards. Decks had an average of 3.9 Teamworks in the top 8 and 3.3 ally cards per deck. There were no training or basic universes that showed up outside of the single use of Dracula's armory. As I mentioned, I love these Spartan Training Grounds, and the asymmetry of being able to pull a Sekhmet or throw 2 trainings for venturing around when your opponent has none seems really great to me. I'm still going to be fine-tuning my Zorolist version of a Leonidas deck to see if I can climb the ranks in Regionals 3 or 4. Alright, so what do I think is going to happen in LRG's second regional in Columbus, Ohio? I think we're going to find new ways to counter this combat attack. I think people ran away from Hercules because of the no strength adventure event, but we saw that not a lot of people played events in general, so I think that he's going to make a showing. Maybe we're also going to see some of our half negators, like Mina, because she's proven really strong, or one of the angry mobs for pressure on their multitude of attacks. Now, brute force lacks a true reservist. Only Mina is really ready to join that discussion. You can't play her negates from behind, so I think brute force is at a little bit of a disadvantage there. Now I can see a Hercules deck supported by the Angry Mob's pressure and Mina Harker for her half negate. But because Angry Mob's middle ages is only a 6, you don't want to leave him surrounded with no 8s or 7 backup. So I think it's more likely that you'd be paired with the industrial or modern age mob, depending on what you want to have in reserve. And if you're having that discussion, I would recommend taking a look at GM Admiral's great reservist video for ideas there. I'll link that in the comments as well. But you can include these 3 along with Billy the Kid in the back for some split pressure. Now this would be interesting because it might have the same amount of gas as some of those combat decks, but would have a very different flavor. Another option could be a defensive counter to the hard-hitting combat brawlers. Robin Hood and Count of Monte Cristo will make opponents think twice about throwing combat strikes. Add in a mummy to really make them regret attacks, and you have the foundations of a decent team. And you've got room to try and tie the grids together a little bit more, or have some fun home bases thrown in. Alternatively, you can try a different defensive flavor and include Sherlock Holmes, King Arthur, Carson of Venus, and Baker Street to proactively get rid of those hits and give enemies angst about focusing Arthur to get through his shield, while providing some solid intelligence backups. Or swap in Jane Porter and the Spartan Training Ground, or swap in Jane Porter and the Spartan Training Ground, let you deal with those 8s, or even Land That Time Forgot to add additional post-concession worries to Jane Porter's too. Finally, you can try going toe-to-toe with combat's big numbers by slugging it out with a Zeus energy deck. Of course, Wicked Witch is an amazing support, and the Angry Mob Middle Ages helps to balance out Zeus's costs. Throwing in another god, this time Anubis, for his 18 points, could keep you slinging lightning bolts in case Zeus goes down. Events weren't a big contributor in the first regional, but those Wicked Witch shifts were really powerful and prevalent. Could we see Time Traveler show up with his 8s to Wicked Witch, as well as his discard place cards to potentially mill out that Harness the Winds early? We also saw everything being very offensive focused, so all these great defensive cards never really made much of a showing. Instead, 2-for-1 defensive cards like the Mummy, Jane, or Count of Monte Cristo could be more prevalent and keep some defense in the deck. Is combat going to maintain its reign, or will there be some plucky challengers from other grids that will try and take the crown? Well, I can't wait to see what happens. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend this one, but I can't wait to see how it goes. Venture well, friends. We'll talk again soon.